Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Today, we're going to talk to Brigadier Arun Sahgal about a very interesting and important subject. How is the global balance of power shifting, especially after the G20? What has been the main shift in the balance of power in the world? How is the new global world order going to open out? And how does he look at the role of the West and the East going forward? Sir, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Adi. It's a pleasure to be back. In fact, I started looking forward to it, so I can have some
Honors all
decent
mine, sir.
experience with an informed audience and a very informed host. Okay, so basically, what we're going to discuss today is that what has happened post G20. You see,
Hmm.
India hosted a very successful G20 conference, a summit. It was there were a lot of naysayers about our
Hmm.
ability to get the Delhi Declaration through. It was being, all kinds of issues were being raised. But the fact of the matter is that India did three things. First, India held an extremely successful G20 conference. It got a muted declaration through, which did not particularly call out Russia, and yet it brought about the impact of the war in Ukraine and its consequences to the rest of the world. See, the onus of the Indian Delhi Declaration is this: that it is not related to any particular area's interest.
Hmm.
It is related to global interest. How it if the war in Ukraine and single-minded pursuit of contestation between Russia and the West is impacting the global order. So that's issue one. The second issue is the declaration also for a long time the G20 was getting hijacked by geopolitical issues, but this declaration was extremely focused on economic and social agenda of the globe. How do we bring about disciplining improvement in the multilateral institution, particularly the global economic infrastructure? How do we make it more uh, uh, important and more usable for the developing world, and also bring about the social impact of health, vaccination, health security, vaccination, women empowerment, education, social infrastructure, usage of digital digital capacities, etc., all back onto the mainstream. And third, which was actually a crowning issue, that India actually walked the talk of getting global south once uh, at the center stage of the global order by ensuring that African Union has become the 21st member of the G20. So it's no longer G20 anymore, but it is a G20. So seeing from that perspective, अ, जिसको हिंदी में कहते हैं कि एक सक्सेसफुल समिट करने के बाद लोगों के मन में काफी ईर्ष्या पैदा हुई। ईर्ष्या इसलिए पैदा हुई क्योंकि people do not think that India is all that great a state. India is having internal issues. India punches well above its weight, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is that India not only walked the talk but it delivered. There
Hmm.
are three main consequences that have emerged as a result of this conference or G20 summit. First, an important trend is that India is one of the leading powers, has emerged as one of the leading powers and a shaper of the global order and a stakeholder of the global order, and also a close partner of the United States.
Hmm.
To that extent, it was a personal triumph for Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah.
The second important issue is the China and Russia have stepped up their opposition to the American led world order, which has dominated the globe since World War II. So now, effectively, there are two blocks that are emerging. There is the North Bloc, or what we call the West oriented bloc, dominated by the United States, and there is the Eastern Bloc, which is comprises of China and Russia. So the important thing is the the bloc, the Eastern Bloc, is trying to fight out the illiberal anti-American coalition and also trying to bring in the countries of the global south like the BRICS and the G20 to fight off the rich nations of the G7.
Hmm.
Now, the interesting aspect of this issue is that India straddles, like I said last time when we spoke on strategic autonomy, India straddles both the ends of this block, these two blocks. As far as the West is concerned, it's not a partner, it's not a member of the G7, although it's an invitee to the G7. And yet, as a member of Quad and a close strategic partner, it has a fair amount of say, particularly in the Indo-Pacific and in the global issues, and the fifth largest economy and an emerging economy, growing at the rate of nearly 7%, has an important say in shaping the global economic order. So, to that extent, it is an important partner of the West. As far as the East is concerned, the East, particularly China, is not very happy with India. But yet, as a member of BRICS and a member of SCO, India has a lot of say to shape the discourse in these areas. The countries in this region do not want to be moving away from a US-led centric order to a China-centric order. They
Hmm.
would like to be a part and parcel of a more stable architecture. So now when we look at the BRICS is, and including the extended BRICS, from Indian perspective, this extended BRICS, that's BRICS 5 plus 6, 11, are all strong partners of India. You see UAE, you see Saudi Arabia, you see Egypt, where a prime minister went immediately on his return from United States. All these are are interested in partnering in a cooperative economic structures for the development of the region and providing global economic goods to help the global south. So this is what the important part is. Uh, Here again, Russia is an interesting player. Russia, at one hand, for geostrategic concerns, is with China purely to ensure that the Americans don't roughshod them, and then they have a strong partner. But yet, they remain a steadfast player of not only India, a partner of India, but also an important construct of or an important player in the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, etc., and also a player which can help deal with Iran. And along with China, it is also playing a role in the eastern, in the Western Pacific, where it is undertaking patrolling and exercises. And the recent visit of North Korea uh, president to Russia, and along with the China, they have now constructing a new sort of
Block.
a geopolitical and a military bloc, which can be restrained. So at one sense, from the West perspective, these are not good developments. But from an Indian perspective, if we look at it from this way, we are looking at balancing of geopolitical aspirations by all these players. So this is an important thing. The second part, at the or the sorry, the third part. The second part was the Eastern bloc coming up. The third part is the status of Europe. Now, if you notice in the G20 summit, European leaders were by and large were muted in their remarks.
Right.
They were angry with the way the Ukraine issue was held, whether Ukraine, Russia was not called out. If you go see the commentary coming out after they had gone back, the commentaries are very clear that enough was not said about to call on account Russia for its intransigence behavior and its continued aggression of Ukraine. So now, so Europe, it is very clear that Europe is losing its both economic and the political heft, and the new emerging world order has little place for Europe, and there is little influence of Europe. Whatever influence Europe is trying to exercise, even as part of his Indo-Pacific strategy, or NATO's attempt to enter into the region, or consolidation of NATO's military capabilities, are a European centric. They don't mean very much, and where they are trying to do it is in Indo-Pacific is largely an appendage of United States,
Hmm.
but not bringing any large military heft along with it. So this is important development, particularly from the perspective of the Americans. The entire edifice of the American alliance system, as we have seen in the last couple of days, and I'll come to that a little later, is based on Westphalian Anglophile alliance system, sorry, Anglophonic alliance system, where the white men are trying to get together and dictate the world, and based on the institutions they created post World War II. So now this structure is crumbling because with weak Europe, whose strategic heft is hugely reduced, the Americans are barefoot of allies or barefoot of strong allies. So when people say that the United States sees India as a strong strategic partner, please try to analyze that when India is seen as a strong strategic partner, it is the only country in Asia and one of the important global economies that has military muscle, reasonable. It has a nuclear weapon state and a strong and a growing economy. None of these features exist as far as Europe is concerned. So, so United States, per force, in its balancing strategy for Asia and is in constructing its new global discourse based on the realities of multilateralism, not unilateralism. We discussed last time unilateralism versus multilateralism. In the construct of the multilateral discourse, United States sees India as a very important partner. Therefore, at one level in the Indo-Pacific, we are member of Quad, and the other we are a member of IMEC. So Indo Middle East Europe corridor is being created in as an economic corridor, as a Western version, or let's put it the West Asian version of BRI, to
I see.
create uh, economic development model and bring about on the basis of economic development a close political cooperative model in the region to help the economies, to develop the region, and to bring about a greater degree of stability and wean them away from the Chinese BRI model,
Sure.
which everybody is now realizing is a
Well,
cost prohibitive and does lead to your country getting caught up in a fiscal deficit to the Chinese. So this is the perspective of Europe. With Europe being playing a low key role, United States in his attempt to project power and influence has little to do without India, and therefore India is becoming central to its let's put it this way, is becoming central to its projections of international order as it perceives emerging over the couple of years. But here, what has happened, as quickly give a short sort of a remark on the Canadian episode that has happened. And the Canadian episode has brought in a very interesting aspect of cultural diversity. There is a strong sense of cultural diversity, which basically means if you are not white, you are not at our level. And if you are an Anglophile, you are part and parcel of us. We will accept you, we'll support you, we'll do everything. But if you are brown or black or yellow for that matter,
Thank you very
you
much.
belong to another species. So this cultural diversity or cultural diversity is an important factor which is leading, which will stall. I will repeat, this will stall greater global integration as we go along, because this is an important factor. Global integration is not political only, it's not economic only, it is also social and cultural. And this cultural issue is going to be an important this thing. So, so this is all I had to say so far. Now I come to uh, China. China is a very interesting country, as we all know, and you are doing so many programs on China. But let me highlight to you uh, the thinking of the Chinese. I think you commented on this, the Kicker report about how they criticize India over G20 report.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
But I'd like to share with you some perceptions of the Chinese thinking about India. Uh, to ensure that I cover the issue properly, I'll just see my notes and speak about them so that I put the right point in it. The first issue with the Chinese are they are saying is that the Modi government has abandoned India's cautious approach to foreign policy and has turned towards real politics and an increasingly anti-China stance. Basically, they are saying is that India is standing up to China and is not listening to China and is questioning China on just about every issue. The second issue they are saying is the Sino-Indian border clash of 2020, which plunged the relations to their lowest point in over 30 years, was the inevitable consequences of this shift. So they're saying is that because India is following a policy of realpolitik, India thinks it's strong enough, India has a lot of backers. So India is now challenging China economically, politically, and what is worse is even militarily. And
Military.
the 2020 Galwan incidents are a consequence of that. The third point they make is that since New Delhi has launched a government wide comprehensive and vengeful strategy. I repeat, government wide comprehensive and vengeful strategy against Beijing that pursues de-Sinization and decoupling from China in the political, economic, military, and societal spheres. So it's a very strong perspective which they're taking. Beijing believes that India is carrying out de-Sinization and decoupling from China in almost all spheres, which includes political, economic, military, and societal. They say these actions are having a negative impact on China's core interests, that is Taiwan, Tibet, South China Sea, and Indo-Pacific region as a whole, and is becoming increasingly obvious.
Mm.
So, what issue is that these actions are impacting Chinese core interests. So this is an important issue because these perspectives are then thought through in the Chinese political and military analysis and their discourses, which could lead to miscalculations on the part of the Chinese. But
Chinese.
here, the interesting part is that if the Chinese believe that India believes itself be strong and capable enough, then the logic and the reason for escalating conflict with India will become that much more cautious in the minds of the Chinese.
Mm.
So they say that India currently has four key international objectives. Number one, assuming the role of a global power. Two, becoming the leader of the global south. Three, acting as the bridge between the west and the south. And fourth is asserting its hegemonic influence over Indian subcontinent and surrounding areas. So
Hegemonic
basically,
influence.
what I repeat, assuming the role of a global power, becoming a leader of the global south. Three, acting as the bridge between West and the South and asserting its hegemonic influence over Indian subcontinent and surrounding areas. What is hurting the Chinese is this, that not only we are politically, militarily standing up against them, what we are also stealing the global South narrative away from them. And by stealing the global narratives away from them, we are leaving Chinese bereft of a convincing logic and narrative for rest of the world, that is the east, where the south, particularly the south, to be on the Chinese bandwagon, and that is pushing the Chinese to invest more in their BRI and other things as a part of a winning strategy. But that perhaps may work or may not work. That's the issue that they worry about. And then they are talking about is that is bridge between west and the south. That what is happening in IMEC is that the West is finally realizing that it is important for the West to get off his high horse and start investing in the global South and start ensuring that the global South also get the the uh, the gets uh, the requisite support in terms of their growth potential, particularly in terms of availability of health and essential commodities like energy, wheat, fertilizers, etc. And for the West to build stakes into it. So by becoming ensuring that the West becomes a stakeholder, for which India is becoming a catalyst for that stakeholder. The important point from the Chinese perspective is that it undermines Chinese global influence. So
Hmm.
when China wants to be a global power or a global player, it is it finds itself to be undermined. Just 2 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so this is an important part. And the last, of course, is this: is that India has now started to undertake its recommitment to the neighborhood, or let's put it, there's a India is becoming concerned about its neighborhood policy, and because it is getting concerned about its neighborhood policy, it is trying to invest more. We're investing more in Bangladesh. The next issue which the Chinese are talking about is that India is also trying to thwart China's rising influence with multilateral platforms such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, or the G20, and increasingly aligning itself with the position held by the West.
Hmm.
So, bottom line, we discussed that the bottom line is India is becoming West P2, and therefore it is hurting us. But but the fact of the matter is that India is emerging as an important player by dint of our hard work, our investments, and our strong policy, where we have indicated to the global South that we are an important partner. We have signed a comprehensive economic agreement with UAE, and now we are building up these corridors, which are going to be very interesting corridors. Incidentally, we are going to have port facilities, high speed rail and road links, then strong high speed container traffic coming into India, and from India going across to rest of Asia. So it's going to be a sort of, it's a game changer kind of a scenario, and in which both Europe and United States are invested. That's the interesting part, from, and that's the
Yeah.
worrying part from the Chinese perspective.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
so this is the next issue. What they're talking about is, with U.S.-China rivalry rising, New Delhi is keen to exploit these divisions for its own economic and geopolitical benefit. It has therefore become a willing participant in Washington's China containment strategy. This issue hurts them the most because the perception from the Chinese side is this, that till yesterday we only had to deal with uh, East Asia, Western Pacific of the American deployments and American commitment for the security of East Asia and Western Pacific, i.e., Taiwan, i.e., Japan, South Korea, etc. But now, with India becoming a strong partner and India developing its integral capabilities, they are now slowly facing a two-front strategy. How
Mm.
do you deal with this two-front strategy is something which is a dilemma for them. Now, this two-front strategy is coming up in a period when they are economically getting restrained, population is getting old, the entire miracle, the Chinese economic miracle and the technological miracle, although very much is sustainable, but it is not as if that it is not being contested. So the
Yeah.
whole miracle is being contested, and the contested players are democracies where the rule of law obtains is a worrisome this thing. So what happens to the Chinese global security initiatives, global development initiatives, uh, etc., etc. So the paradigm of Chinese alternative model is getting questioned over here. This is something the guys in the United States, particularly in the United States establishment, whom we talk to, who are not thick-headed. There are also a number of thick-heads there who understand this.
Mm.
But the most interesting twist that is happening is that in this discourse, the Chinese are finding partners, particularly in the economic domain, in Europeans, and most importantly, the Brits, and to a degree even the Australians. So what is important over here is to understand is that the geopolitical dynamics are at full play. India is trying to carve out its own niche, but India will have to fight a large number of these turbulent, which will try and push us down one way or the other, both through external narratives and overplaying our internal inconsistencies, so they believe, or our internal narrative. So that's the issue that we have. The next issue they talk about is, there are 10 of them incidentally. Yeah? We are on the eighth. As a
Yeah.
result, part of India's policymaking elites now see maintaining a certain amount of tensions with Beijing as a way of deepening their ties with Washington and more generally with the West. Look at the mindset of these guys. These inputs are directly from China.
Wow.
Okay, from Chinese very highly influential think tanks who are closely working with the policy makers in China. Uh, so 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 the as a result of this, the next point is the tensions between Beijing and New Delhi are set to grow, and the emotional volatility of both Indian and Chinese public opinion will remain one of the major challenges facing India China relations. So, because the Chinese Communist Party, through its false narrative, propaganda, disinformation campaign, is building up India as an ogre in Asia, which is being supported by the West, is creating a narrative of emotional volatility where the people to people confrontations will increase. Right now, by and large, what is there is that if you go to China, I'm sure you have people who go to China will realize that there is no intrinsic hostility to the Indians in China. You are very well received over there. But this playing up of this emotional narrative, just like what we are now seeing in Canada, is something that is uh, can happen as the time goes by. So this is an
Create
important.
anomaly. Hmm.
So the next issue is Chinese. This is the interesting part. Despite all this, the Chinese analysts believe that we have stakes and interest in stabilizing relations with India so as
Yeah.
not to jeopardize our own development goals. So the prescientness of the Chinese can be seen from the fact is that the Chinese believe that despite the earlier 9 points, where they look at India as a grave challenger supported by the West, an emerging power which is having impact on its own growth potential and its own attempts to creating a Sino-centric Asia, we still need to engage with China. And that is an important perspective. And if and for your viewers, therefore, when you see Indian policy vis-a-vis the Chinese, we are firm on two issues. The status quo ante must be made created in the border. Chinese must vacate aggression. And two is that we are willing to discuss the future of the bilateral relations only after this first step has been taken by the Chinese. Yet, you find that India is willing to engage right through with the Chinese. So in the real politic world, therefore, it is important to understand that you, I mean, you have a right to be critical of China. Absolutely correct. You have to. But the fact of the matter is that there is what we create, say, a guardrails being created in terms of fairly high level engagement and ensuring that continuation of our relationships, uh, despite the tension on the borders, is not adversely impacted. Now, that's an
Hmm.
important issue. You cannot be gung ho, and that's part of the real politics. Now, my next point is China India standoff. I know you probably will be doing, you have done this thing, but I like to highlight two, three,
Please, sir.
four strategic issues.
Sir.
Uh, it's not important what Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, did and accusing India, etc. That's an issue which is being debated, etc. What is important for us to take stock of the reactions of the Five Eyes and the narrative of what they are trying to propagate. The narrative which they are trying to propagate is that we have carried out an extrajudicial killing, which is against the democratic, social democratic order, and they are calling it a transnational transgression. The fact that we have been sharing information, intelligence, etc., with them on the activities of these separatists in their own country is completely overlooked. So the narrative of of social order, their democratic credentials, and the rule of law is being given importance over anything else, particularly as it impacts on the social system of the West. And it is in this context you'll see United States pushing the agenda and trying to tell us that we must cooperate with this thing and bring this whole investigation to end. We find the British uh, supporting. What is more important than the British support for the Canadians is a huge disinformation campaign has been launched by the British through their magazine like Economist, Financial Times, Guardian, etc., etc., who have all already decided India is complicit in this action.
Judge, jury, and executioner. Yes, sir.
They have done judge, jury, and execution to this, and therefore they strongly believe that India is the is the is the perpetrator, and therefore India has to be taught a lesson. Now, this United States also, interestingly, they were initially muted, but their political, or let's say the executive leadership, i.e., Blinken, i.e., NSA, etc., etc., and nuanced by their intelligence agencies, are also trying to push the same agenda. The whole idea basically is this: is like Mr. Sullivan said, there is no free lunch. The American values or the white man's value system cannot be played around with, and by your actions of what do they call the transnational terrorism, you are attempting to create disturbance in the present social order, which is based on relative degree of freedom of speech, rule based, and where you are allowed certain degree of actions but within constraint. What you are trying to do is to put fear in the minds of the local population. And once you are putting the fear in the local population, you're disturbing the social order. So the narrative, which is now being thought to be created in these states, is this: that India has disturbed this social coherence in their system. And if India is allowed to get away with it, tomorrow it is Pakistan. Remember that woman was killed, Pakistani activist from
Karima
Kashmir,
Baloch.
Imran Baloch was killed, and another man was killed in Finland. So these kinds of killings will continue, will start, and therefore this will impact both the order and also will impact the migrations. Now, please understand this. For Canadians, migration is a big issue. They don't have people. Simple. They don't have people. They need these people. United States also have people. Do not have people. They do not have bright people. The average American is a duffer. So they need this manpower. No, it's true. You cannot. I mean, who would let 300,000, 400,000 foreign kids to come to your
Yeah,
universities
yeah.
and stuff, and then go back? I mean, in Indian case, we our guys don't come back. They are now started to come back, but in case of China, they always go back and create Xinhua and all kinds of technological institutions in their own country. So this is what is the worrisome thing over them. So Trudeau has unleashed a very different kind of a bomb, which is a simmering bomb, and which they are now trying to collate together and to bring India down. So now the effort basically is going to be is this: that make India admit there was some action in which some Indian persons were complicit. They will also make it show that Indian government was not involved. It was some rogue element, but there was some back end connection will be created, and then they will be told these kind of things, boys, are not good. You should not get involved in all these things. These things are create unnecessary turbulence in our social system. So therefore, we this time we overlook it, but don't do it again, kind of a scenario, and that's going to happen. So, so, so this is how. But India is taking none of it. And as the time goes by, both within India, the the things are
Feeling
becoming
hard.
we are becoming more diffident. A, B, we are getting more support. Yesterday, the Sri Lankan foreign minister, you read very well that he said Canadians are used to this. Canadians have been given for years asylum to the LTE. So so this is an important part. It's not what he did, the evidence. Evidences are can always be created, sir. Evidence is not. But the question is, what is the nature of evidence? Is it permissible in a court of law? Right now,
Yeah,
they do not have anything. Otherwise, like Washington Post has come out with a story that six guys got out of the truck and shot down some with 50 bullets, and so those kind of stories will keep coming out. There'll be bits and bits coming out here and there. The whole idea is, but at some stage they will say, okay, the car driver in his cell phone had talked to somebody in the Indian embassy. So Indian embassy probably are aware of it, or he was an earlier employee of somebody or the other, or one guy. So so this kind of stories will come. So the whole idea is plausible deniability by India, showing to the world that there is a back end connection, but at the end of it, trying to say, oh, and so resolving this issue. But we are coming to a major issue. The major issue, sir, is this. When West does targeted killing, Almain Zawari, Osama bin Laden, hundreds of other targeted killing, and now the new narrative is coming is where it's okay to do targeted killing in weak states like Africa and other countries,
yeah.
but it's not
Not in
okay
the
to do
Western countries. Hmm.
not in the
Not
Western
in the
countries.
Western countries.
So this is the kind of narrative which is being played out. I think so. I try to give you the so as far as India is concerned, uh, as India's geopolitical and geoeconomic profile rises, it will continue to face pressure. As this pressure, unfortunately, is not from the north but of the east as well, including Southeast Asia, where people are not comfortable. The India's rising profile is uncomfortable, sadly speaking, to a lot of Indians as well who who live in Lutyens, Delhi or other
That's
places.
fine, sir. Those are
But
brown sahibs. That's okay.
but the point at issue is that India will continue to strive. India will do well because India, like in China, has chosen a path of development, growth, and continues to abide by rule-based orders. So
Sir,
I think under these circumstances, the attempts of the global order to rebalance will always contain centrality of India. India will remain a central part, an issue that India has earned, a role India has earned, a place that India has earned post G20. Thank you very much.
fantastic, sir. Thank you, sir. This was, I mean, quite an eye opener when you've actually brought about. I think you've gone through the West, China, which are the two game players. Uh, Brilliant summation, if I may say this, sir. Because the Chinese, though, I keep tracking and I can see the fumes coming out of the back of their heads. Little bit duma is coming out. Uh, they're not very happy with what's happening, and they're gonna. I presume, and just as a closer, I presume that they will try and create a situation to embarrass us somewhere or the other. Uh, I don't know
They
if they
will.
will be successful or not, but they will try and do something here and there because they are looking at the factor that the Western game has not played, is just not played well. So how do we kind of capitalize on it, and how do we figure that out? So I think that's something that we need to be careful of. But otherwise, fantastic summation of the situation. So I'm so grateful that you've taken out the time. Looking forward for more interactions in the future, sir. Till then,
Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. God bless.